Hello and welcome. Good morning to another edition of Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We have a special guest today, Alex Kingsbury, Editorials Editor from the New York Times Editorial Board. We'll be talking about a special section today from the Editorial Board and our national crisis. Our host, of course, is Shree Srinivasan, Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of Digimentors, a digital and virtual events consultancy. My name is Neil Parekh, executive producer of the New York Times Read Along and occasional guest host. Shree is not on the Upper West Side today. Let's see where he is. Shree, where are you joining us from? Oh, that's a different view. I guess Shree is joining us from San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Hello, everybody, and hello, Neil, our Vice President of Events and Comms at Digimentors. We are just delighted to have all of you with us. 5 years of the New York Times Read Along. And this looks like Kerala, but it isn't, with the coconut trees and everything. This is San Juan, Puerto Rico, a place that's been very special to me and Rupa, my wife, and we've been coming here for 20 years. And I'm here for a week, and it's great to see everybody joining us from around the world. Tell us where you're watching from. We have a very special episode today. We have Alex Kingsbury here, who put together this big takeout section of the New York Times opinion that everybody will want to read. People have been talking about it for the last couple of days. And so I'm just glad that we can talk about this. Look at Doug Levy joining us from Burbank in California. It's 5:30 in the morning. What are you doing, Doug? Great to have you.
And we have Diane joining us from Margate, New Jersey. Patricia Freudenberg joining us from New York. Patricia, great speaking to you earlier in the week. One of our regulars, Shree, my mom. Hi, Mom. Thanks for the
great to have you here.
5th anniversary greetings. Jennifer joining us from Queens. Pradnya joining us from Silver Spring, Maryland. So what I'd like to do, Shree, we want to get into the show as quickly as possible today. There's Patricia again, wishing everyone an amazing holiday. Jonathan Borstein from the East Village, keep meaning to get back to Puerto Rico to explore the old town of San Juan. Anita Ratnam from Chennai, and our friend Stefan Kaplan joining us as well. What I wanted to do, Shree, is to give a quick shout out to our production team, Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranakis. We would not be able to put on the New York Times Read Along without them. They do such great work every week, providing context, providing links, engaging with our audience. Makes a huge difference for the show on a regular basis. And this week, we have, like I said earlier, a very special guest. We have Alex Kingsbury, who is the editorials editor of the New York Times. He is joining us, and we're going to be talking about a very special section they put together that he oversaw, and he'll tell us about some of the late nights and early mornings that it took to get it out and get it on the web. So we will go to that in just a moment, and we'll bring Shree back on. And Shree, we'll just unmute your mic so we can hear from you. And then we'll bring on Alex as well, right?
Yes.
Alex.
We're excited to see Alex after many years. Hi, Alex. Great to see you again. And
yeah, great to be here.
Congrats on your incredible work at the New York Times. Editorials Editor of the New York Times. That must be a dream job.
It's a thankless job, I'll tell you that.
So tell us what makes it thankless.
Looking for misplaced commas and so forth and so on. So,
You do a little more than that, I assume.
So let's go. Let me just ask you, how are you doing? Where are you? And how has your family been handling the pandemic?
Good. We're here in Manhattan. We got back about 6 weeks ago. We were my folks live up in Maine, so we were there for a couple months and came back. I have a young child, and she went to daycare, and somebody tested positive for COVID. We got the notification yesterday, so we'll be quarantined for a week. So joining you from quarantine, such as it is.
Oh my goodness! I'm so sorry. Holding good thoughts for your
all asymptomatic. So knock on wood, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Wow. Tell us about, if you can, this special section and how it came to be, and the headline that one of the first sentences in this is called "The Case Against Donald Trump and Our National Crisis." Donald Trump's re-election campaign poses the greatest threat to American democracy since World War II.
That's it. Yeah. So this is a project that has been in the works since, I guess, mid-August was probably when we came up with the sort of game plan for putting this together. The idea was, as an editorial board, we have, weighed in on the Trump administration, obviously, for since it began and since before it began. But we did want to have some sort of closing statement, presuming that Trump loses. And if he wins, all of this still stands, right? I mean, this is sort of our verdict on the past 3.5, going on 4 years of his administration. And we really just wanted to put it all on paper and for the history books and for people going to the polls today, wanted to just say exactly what we think. And this is it, unfiltered. We really wanted to take the gloves off and lay this all down. So the idea came to us in, I would say, the first, second week of August. We started thinking about it. There are a number of sort of routes that you can go in thinking about a big editorials package. And the way we decided to do this one was to do an unsigned editorial that would sort of take the distillation of the rest of the package in one sort of shareable, readable, not too long and too wordy, sort of throat cleary kind of thing, present it, and then have the supporting, I call it an indictment, but you get the idea, the sort of supporting cast of thoughts that go along and underpin and support the central thesis, which is the editorial. And those are all from the editorial board. So traditionally, editorial boards are unsigned. We write unsigned pieces. The Times, in addition to other places, has been moving more in the direction of having editorial writers write signed and unsigned pieces, which is something that we're doing at the Times. And so the signed pieces underpin and support this larger unsigned piece, which is the lead. So, basically you've got the unsigned pieces, and then up to the pyramid at the top, which is the unsigned editorial. And then, the cover sort of says it all. So that was kind of the thinking behind it, a pyramid, if you will, of argument. And that's how we sort of assembled it and put it together. Two different versions, right? The online and the print, and we could talk about both, but that was kind of the thinking behind it.
Well, each of these, so they're basically mini essays or essays, each written by one expert on this topic, correct?
Yeah, so they're all members of the editorial board. I think there are like 14 members of the editorial board in total. We got 5 signed pieces there. There's a lot of other copy which isn't signed, but was also contributed by the members of the editorial board. So all of those people had insight into this in one way or another. Some of them have signed pieces, others just contributed either thoughts or unsigned pieces, and it was all sort of stuck in the blender and stuck on the page.
So let's talk for a minute. I'm just going to show again that editorial board, the full editorial board, because people who are watching may not quite understand what the editorial board is. Who are these folks? How did they come to be here? Neil, as you can see, worked very hard to put all of this together for us and to see what expertise people have and what they write about. And so can you explain what we're looking at?
Sorry, do you want me to do that or?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. You can just tell us, yeah.
Okay. So this is the editorial board of the New York Times. Katie Kingsbury, obviously, is the editorials page editor. Binya covers.
No relation, right?
No relation, though it has often come up. We were in the same journalism school class at Columbia. Oddly enough, we're not related. We have the same last name. If it was Smith, this would not come up, but it has come up quite a lot. We were together at the bottom. We were in the same class at Columbia. We both went to news magazines and found ourselves both in Boston, where she was on the editorial board of the Boston Globe. She hired me to come work for her there, and then at the Times as well. So we've been together for a while, working on reimagining what unsigned editorials can be, and this is sort of our project. So Binya Applebaum covers economics. He's in DC. Greg Bensinger's on the West Coast, covers tech. Michelle Cottle's in DC. Mara Gay's here in New York. Janine, Lauren are here in New York. Serge is in DC. Brent's also in New York. Farah's in Boston. Jesse's here in New York. And Nick Fox is here in New York as well. So a whole mix of people, some people who have been on the board. I think Brent Staples has been on the editorial board since 1990. I'd have to go and check the bio, but he's a long, our deepest institutional voice there. And then I think Greg is our most recent addition, and he's about 9 months on the board. So a whole range of people, everyone deeply experienced journalist in one area or another, and they bring all their skills to bear on projects like this.
And so together you sit down and decide what the editorial stance is going to be for those unsigned daily editorials. I mean, not all of you, but you and experts, the relevant expert, is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, so the editorial board is the institutional voice of the Times. So we report to the publisher, and the idea is that the institutional voice, excuse me, of the Times is something that is going to be there long after we're gone. So my job as the editorials editor is to sort of keep one eye on the past and one eye on the future, and I'm reading, the editorial endorsement of Abraham Lincoln and anticipating what someone's going to read our endorsement of Joe Biden in 100 years. So it's a really forward and backward looking job simultaneously. It's a little odd in the journalism world to sort of to do unsigned editorials, but we're trying to make them relevant and we're trying to make them interesting and useful to readers. And so that's how we kind of think about it. It's an institutional voice, and we want to make it consistent and relevant, and offer people something that they can sort of take away from a section like this or any of the unsigned editorials, some sort of action stance. So we find for the unsigned editorials, particularly things like local endorsements. So if we have people, if we have something on the city council in New York, or if we have a bill in Washington that we want to see passed, those are particularly effective. And so if we argue from that position, we say, you should pass HR, whatever it is, we find that particularly effective. Endorsements on the presidential level, one way or another. When we make big calls like this, we get people talking about things and get people thinking about things. And that's, at root what we're trying to do. We're trying to start a conversation about things and trying to move that conversation in a specific direction. So that's the charge. And hopefully when people pick up their paper today, they'll talk about it with their friends and family.
Well, thank you for being here and for sharing all this insight, because those of us who love kind of trying to understand what's happening at the Times, this is really useful. Folks, tag your friends right now. They can watch this live or later. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So this is a chance to be on multiple platforms and talking about all of this. Alex is on Twitter, Kingsbury NYT. Please follow him as well. And just one last thing about kind of the overall structure of the editorial board. Do you actually, like the Supreme Court justices, do you sit down and discuss together, like in a conference setting, and say, okay, this is what our stance is going to be, this is how we're going to handle this is what we're going to do? Do you vote talk about that, please?
Yeah, sure. We all don our black robes and we hear oral arguments and take written statements. No, listen. Before times, before the plague, we would all gather twice a week, I think, for editorial board meetings. That's just kind of the weekly cadence of the operation. Now, of course, it's remotely, and we have people scattered to the winds all over the world. So one of the roles of the editorial board is also to do interviews with newsmakers, people who want to, bring business before the board. If you want, some sort of bill passed, or if you're lobbying for something or other, or if you're the president of France and you're in New York and want to come and visit, we have a sort of open door policy for a lot of that. So we do a lot of sort of open door meetings with people who want to address things to the board. And then, we work generally by sort of general agreement. You'd be surprised. Some things are more sort of worthy of discussion than others. But, if we say, well, let's come out in favor of, stripping all military bases of Confederate names, you'll have a bit of discussion about it, and we'll come to an agreement that, that's something we want to call for, and then someone will go off and write it. It's a pretty collegial sort of place. There aren't a lot of disagreements, but there are a lot of discussions. So, is court expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court, is that something we want to come out in favor of? Well, there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. So it's really interesting. It's a group of people who are very versed in the news, constantly on top of all this sort of stuff and responding to news as it breaks, but also sort of longer term things. So we're weighing in on Armenia and Azerbaijan, for instance, and then we're weighing in on the stimulus. So it's a group of people with a local angle on whatever they're seeing in their daily lives, but a global view at the same time.
And how do folks like the columnists, where do they fit in all of this? Christoph, Dowd, Stevens, etc.?
Yeah, so they're part of the opinions section, but they're not part of the editorial board. So the editorial board is distinct from the columnists. Though, as I said, when we have these sort of meetings where different newsmakers come in, it's sort of an open invitation for anyone in the opinions section, from op-ed editors to columnists, to weigh in on different things. So they're sort of invited to meetings, but they're not sort of a regular part of efforts like this. This is an editorial board project.
Got it. And can you tell us, what did the Times say about Abraham Lincoln back in the day that guides you in your work today? Like, what did they?
Well,
what you tell from what you read.
Yeah, I mean, you can go and read it. It's a pretty interesting editorial. They're in favor of Abraham Lincoln, provided he doesn't say a whole lot about slavery. So it's a really interesting kind of period piece. But I think the more interesting part about the editorial board is that we're the institutional voice, but we're not a non-critical one. So one of the first projects that I worked on was called was about women's rights and abortion access 2 years ago. Yeah. And we did one of the editorial writers, Brent Staples, did a really critical piece of the Times' own coverage of crack babies. And it was a sort of deep look at the way that the paper had addressed that issue at the time, and sort of what it meant and its implications about the future. So we have this interesting institutional role where we're a little, we can look back and say things about what the Times has done in the past, and again, also kicking it forward. So that's kind of the role as we see ourselves, the institutional voice, but not different from sort of the communications department.
Sure. And before we get to the special section, are there cases of where you re-examined everything and said that we got it wrong? The crack babies story, was that one such editorial? Or?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a good example. I mean, listen, we're journalists just like everybody else. We have our own sort of role within the Times, and Yeah, I just sort of toss that out as the first example that comes to mind. But it's something that we're definitely thinking about.
Great. So let's talk about the special section. I know you have a copy. Neil also got a copy of the paper, and we can just see that it's actually the entire week in review, right? The Sunday review has been taken over by this project, and we'll show some of the headlines so that people can understand how dramatic this is, just seeing this all laid out. So maybe first your opinion on this, from where you had it as an idea back in August to today. Did you, because this is a lot of resources to put into something like this, how many people did you have to convince that this is the right way to go?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Sunday review comes out every week, so the infrastructure is there to do this, and the same people that put this out are the same people that put it out every week. And once this was all to bed and the proof had been sent off to the printers, I sort of composed a sort of thank you note to the staff. And what I realized at the end of it was, these people do this every week, and this was a bit of a special thing because it was all the editorial board, but the same infrastructure that supports this is the one that puts this out every week. So you have an amazing team of designers, copy editors, paginators, fact checkers, so forth and so on. So same team. In this particular instance, everything was about the editorial board, and we haven't done that for a while. I think the last special takeover the Sunday review that I was in charge of was the something called the Privacy Project, which was last year. It was about sort of tracking and different apps that sort of track you. So it's rare that we do this, but when we do, we try and go big and try and make a big statement. And the idea here was to underline, what's on the cover. This idea that Donald Trump poses a unique threat to American democracy, and that people should really take their civic duty seriously and go out and vote.
Wow. Can we, Neil, if you could flip to the very first page section? I think there was a very powerful statement in the subhead that I wanted to show. Yeah, man unworthy of the office he holds. And I just wanted to read that subhead right there on the left. Let's see here. Donald Trump can't solve the nation's most pressing problems because he's the nation's most pressing problem. Talk about this a little bit, please.
Yeah, I mean, as a writer, you're always jealous of another writer who comes up with a line that you wish you'd written. And in this case, very jealous of the person who wrote that. We don't say who writes the unsigned pieces, but the writer in me was really jealous that somebody strung together those words in a better order than I managed to do it. So that's the central thesis. If you look at the lead of the piece, that went through several different iterations. Obviously, the lead is something you spend a lot of time on. The original version was something like, the seriousness of the moment, brings us to the conclusion that blah, 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 Donald Trump, what you've got there. So the question was, do you go directly at the lead and just say it as we've stated here, which is eventually what we ended up doing, or do you have a little bit of what you generously call throat clearing before it? So we sort of went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and eventually settled on this.
So you went with Donald Trump's re-election campaign poses the greatest threat to American democracy since the Second World War. That's not pulling any punches.
Yeah, no, we decided to take all the fingers of the glove off and just go right at it. For time style, is it the Second World War or World War II? These are the things that you get into with copy editors as these things are going off to the presses. But the deck there, so that you have the headline, a man unworthy of the office he holds, and then the deck is that part above the byline, which is the editorial board. We kick this stuff around until the minute it goes off to the presses. That could have easily been the lead of this piece, and I think it was in an earlier draft.
One thing I wanted to talk about, Alex, the photos essay that you have as part of this. So, starting with the bottom in the print section, So talk a little bit about the difference between print and online. In the print section, you have 5 pictures with captions. And so there are 2 things I want to get to. One, the discussion around how many pictures and how long the caption should be. And then also the choice of pictures. You have, starting with the bottom, I'm going to end with the one on the top, which is the economy in tatters. But you have the one about women's rights under attack, a planet in peril. You have Black lives at risk, right? And immigration halted. Online, those pictures are actually different. You have for women, you went with this one from the women's rights marches. So can you talk a little bit about the selection of the photos?
Sure. I mean, I guess one of the things that will always sort of stick in my mind from this project is that originally when I sat down and wrote the headlines for these things, I wrote an economy in taters because I misspelled it, and everybody thought that we were talking about Idaho or something. But when we went through it, the idea was that the breadth and the depth of the corruption of the Trump administration was so vast that we really couldn't, even in, I think this piece runs about 11,000 words, just simply wasn't sort of, we couldn't wrap it all in. And so we came up with this idea to do some iconic images of the Trump administration. And I'm sure, everybody listening can imagine some of the images of the Trump administration that really stick in their minds. And for me, it was the picture of the immigrant and his daughter who died in the river. And I knew that I wanted to have that photo be a part of this. Yeah, right there, Oscar and Valeria. I really wanted that picture to be a part of this. And we decided to go with a series of iconic images and then just do expanded captions, which the board members drafted. So again, when you're sort of figuring this all out, you have your idea and then you sort of put it to the test and pressure test it and then put it into print. And so I think we wrote, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 of these captions, whittled it down to 4 for print. And then had a few more. And so the original idea was, well, we'll just put them all online and then we'll put a few in the paper. When 1 or 2 of the pieces weren't coming through, we thought, well, we'll do more photos on the page or do 2 pages of photo captions. And one of the things, we sort of give this to the designers, and the designers said, well, you can have 4 photos at 250 word captions, or you can have 5 photos at 200 word captions, or whatever it was. So we sort of went back and forth between the number of photos you can have and the length of the captions and what sort of worked best in terms of the package as a whole. And so we settled on 5. And I think the word count for each of the captions comes out at about 220 words. So in the end, it's funny things like word count that really come down to it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got 5 there. I think we have 3 more online. Pardon me. So it's 8 in total.
This one was online rather from the Supreme Court.
Yeah, super
reception.
There. Yep.
And then
on LGBTQ rights, which were eroded. We have another one on.
Can we just pause there Neil? Can we just go back? Sorry to that. Yeah, we want to just. Again, we have a big international audience that may not have been paying attention to all the details of everything that we're talking about, but this is a reception that took place after before the super spreader event in the Rose Garden for the announcement of the nomination of Barrett. And you're seeing that no one's wearing a mask. This is why this president has to be held responsible for this event and just the general tone of what's happened in this country, that he has dismissed the science every chance he's had. And that's how we end up like this, and that's where all those people have gotten sick, including his own staff, his own family members, and it hasn't chastened him in any way. Sorry, please continue.
Me?
Yeah, you were talking about the LGBTQ. This was another one that was online only.
Yeah. These are the other ones that it's not a sort of a matter of which is more important. We had some space in print and more space online, so some went online and some went in print. I would say another sort of thing for all the insiders, if we can go to the picture of the cars and the food line. I was talking about this in the pre-interview, and I can read it exactly from our.
And you spelled it right.
You're talking about
economy and tater.
So,
there you go.
So you want to set this up, Alex? What is this image showing?
Yeah,
for people? They won't be able to read the fine print.
Of course, sure. So we wanted one of these photos to talk about the economy under Trump at the moment. There was a survey that just come out that said, 8 million Americans have fallen into poverty since May. Just a staggering number that really sort of defies any description and definitely any sort of visual image. And
that's your Slack message.
Yeah. I was going to read this, but there you go. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, certainly. So you saw this image. Yeah. When you were going through it, right? When you're going through the proofs?
Just before we were going through proofs, and I saw this image. We'd gone through a couple of them, all sort of taken from above. They were all different food lines. So these are Americans waiting at food banks. And we'd gone through 4 or 5 different photos, all of them sort of very striking. And then they sort of swapped this one out and put it on there. And, I'm going through and I had only a couple hours of sleep at this point and sort of looked at this photo and I thought, well, there's got to be something wrong with this. Like, this must be a car dealership or something. This can't really be a food line. So I asked the copy desk to check it and then the photo department to double check it. And, I don't think you can look at this photo and not have tears come to your eyes. This is a food line in the United States, and it looks like a car dealership for all these cars just sitting there waiting.
I gotta say, Alex, I really thought this was a car dealership with the way they line up after they're offloaded from a ship, right? Coming from Japan or going to Japan or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I literally had to, have people go and check this out because I didn't think it was real. And it is. And that's where we're at.
So this is people Alex, waiting to go move one car at a time, move forward, collect food, and then feed their families. And this is happening not just in this very dramatic photo, but in New York today, it's happening. 10,000 people line up to get food in different places. This is the state of America today. And this is the economy that we were told was already the world's best and was doing great. But so well, Alex, that most Americans couldn't write a $400 check if they had to, when the economy was fantastic, allegedly. So now to imagine it's worse is sort of hard to even fathom.
Yeah, it's really just, that photo says it all. It says more than I could say in 1,000 words.
Alex, I wanted to ask you about the different pictures online and in print. So, for example, for the women's rights under attack online, there's this great close-up, but in print, it's a picture of the rally. So we'll show that in just a moment. So this rally picture at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And then similarly for Black Lives at Risk, it's a great picture of George Floyd projected onto the, I think it's the Robert E. Lee statue.
That's a beautiful picture. Love that image.
But online, you're using this picture of someone at a protest. Can you talk about the editorial decisions around this?
Yeah, listen, there are 1,000 different photos you could choose from the Trump administration, and there's a tension between doing an amazing image versus an iconic one. So there's another image, and I don't think it made the final cut in all of these, but Trump sort of sitting with his arms crossed, and Angela Merkel and Macron sort of leaning across a desk and yelling at him. I really wanted to get that image in there somewhere, and it didn't happen. Like, it just sort of didn't make sense. So all of these things, as you talk to sort of any photo editor, there's a tension between using images that are very well known and sort of have become, in many ways, like a cultural sort of wallpaper, I guess. You know, like, I don't want to say stock images, but images that are so familiar that everyone can sort of look past them. And then images that are so powerful, they really need to be sort of displayed in their own terms. So when you're putting together something like this, it's not just the photo, right? It's the photo in the context of everything else that's on the page. And then, you know, in a excuse me, in a section like this, it's the images that are on one page, but also on the facing page, so that when you open it, you're treating the visual image of both of those pages together. So that's sort of the thinking that goes into it. And when it's online, right, it's just a different sort of experience. So you again, when it's online, you have several different versions, right? So are you thinking about the reader who's reading this on a desktop? Or are you thinking about the reader who's reading it on mobile or on the iPad or so forth and so on? So those are the kind of considerations that when we're thinking about this, the visual treatment and sort of the visual aesthetic of a project like this, you're bringing different things to bear on that judgment. And so that's sort of how we were thinking about a lot of this. But again, like, these are sort of generic or generalized areas that we wanted to weigh in on. So immigration, I'm sure you could pick a dozen photos about immigration, or women's rights, or LGBTQ rights being eroded, or whatever, militias and guns and so forth. So there are tons of these images. One of the images that I wanted to get, actually, that we didn't do, because we realized that it was an image that had just been so widely distributed, was one of the anti-lockdown protests in Michigan, where you had one of these militia members sort of screaming at a cop, and you had the two of them. It was a great image because they were both sort of unmasked, and I think the one guy had a beard, and he's got his AR-15 in the Capitol building there, and he's shouting at the cop, and the cop is sort of stoically standing there. We really wanted to have that, but when you sort of see it, it just didn't kind of work, and so we went with the too many fingers on too many triggers image that's there. So again, the images themselves really do stand on their own, but they also have to stand on their own in the context of these larger packages. So that's sort of some of the editorial thinking that went into that.
And there's one other image that wasn't in print. Sorry, Sri. The one other image that wasn't in print. This is, I think this is the image. Is this the image you were talking about, Alex?
That's the one. That's the one we settled on, just because it's such a great image. I mean, look on the sides there. You've got, this is just sort of out of focus. You have this really interesting weapon there in the front. The guy's got a great mask on, and his eyes are sort of, right on the horizon, but also looking sort of above you. It's a really great image. He's got this weird kind of woodland camo thing going on there, and an interesting sight on the gun. This is really kind of just really captures the moment. It didn't have the tension of the photo that I was describing of the guys inside the courthouse sort of yelling at each other, but this image was so powerful in the context of all these other images that we put together that the choice was easy on this one.
And there's a question from Patricia Freudenberg. It seems like the New York Times purposely didn't post a clear picture of Trump. Any comments on that in the special section? The pictures of Trump are out of focus. Someone else commented that the page 2 and 3 are split, which is interesting. So we'll show that real quick to our viewers, so you can see that. If you pull out a little, you have the hard copy right there. So it's a man unworthy of the office he holds, and it's a full what is that? 10 columns across, or 1, 2, 3, 12 columns across, but it splits it right down the middle in terms of the image.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the design and photo people really, were at the top of their game on this one. We don't sort of need to talk about Trump in explicit terms because it's there. I mean, one of the things that you'll notice is that there aren't actually photo captions for these lead images on any of these pages, right? Which is rare for us. I think these are all Devin's photos, are they? Oh, no. Devin and...
The one on the right is Christopher Lee. That's the out of focus.
Yeah, Damon has
Looks
one.
like some kind of. This
Yes.
one is Devin.
Yeah.
On the left.
Yeah. So
Let's see. Devin is this one as well.
Yeah. So all these were sort of black and white and were, portrait studies, I would say. You don't really need to go Trump, Trump, Trump all the time if you're sort of, show, don't tell.
Sure.
But we did think long and hard about having these in black and white and then, bam, bring in the color on page 9. And I think that was the climate picture in particular is just such a gorgeous image. I mean, if I could just blow that up and use the entire page for that photo is really amazing.
And then these are the color pictures that you mentioned on page 9.
Yeah.
Starting with the parking lot, the father and daughter that drowned, etc. The back page, Alex, this is not online. A series of quotes.
It's special to print. We don't want to say that it's not online. This is
It's special to print
for the print
course.
readers. Yes, of course.
Of course.
So this is a great idea that Katie had to do sort of a page of quotes. We did a feature about 3 weeks ago. It was an op-ed compiled by Republicans. So it was all past statements sort of taken together, opposing the nomination of a Supreme Court justice in the final days of a campaign. So we did like sort of an op-ed written by Republicans in 2015, 16. And so this is kind of a riff on that idea. This went through 6 or 7 different entire redesigns in terms of how we wanted it to look and how many fonts and sort of the presentation and the how much white space and which were going to be the featured quotes and so forth and so on. I think it came out really, really well. This was definitely a last minute sort of, we sort of kicked it back to the designers and said, can you guys reimagine this at, I think it was about 2:00 on a Friday, and the stuff has to send off to the printers on Friday night. And they just did a really a heck of a job. It was.
I'm just going to read the name. I mean, we see some of the quotes here. Michael Cohen has the center quote, "As I've been saying since the beginning, Trump was a mobster, plain and simple." But you have quotes from the former White House lawyer, Ty Cobb, Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State, Anthony Scaramucci, former White House Communications Director, John Kelly, former White House Chief of Staff, Richard Spencer, former Secretary of the Navy, Omarosa Manigault Newman, former Trump aide contestant on The Apprentice, Elizabeth Newman, former Assistant Homeland Security Secretary, John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, Gary Cohn, former Director of the National Economic Council, Miles Taylor, former Chief of Staff at the Department of Homeland Security, Jim Mattis, former Secretary of Defense, and of course, Mary Trump, President Trump's niece. I mean, that's an all-star lineup right there.
Let the words speak for themselves, right?
Alex, we have about 15 minutes left with you.
Yes.
So we just want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask some questions. If you have any questions for Alex, please jump in here and post your questions and we'll bring them to him. Let me ask you, Alex, about what the skeptics will say about this. That this is the Times going over the top. This may turn off independents and people who might be persuadable. You might say there aren't any persuadables anymore. So just talk a little bit about all of that.
I would really like to meet an independent voter who's sort of turned off by this special section of the print New York Times. I just think at this moment, listen, 14.5 million people have already voted. The voting is underway. The question really now is, can people exercise their rights in a democracy? Fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. You don't have to go far on social media to see videos of people waiting hours and hours in line to vote, and it's striking that no other democracy has to do that. And I think that's what people should really be focused on. I would, again, I would love to meet the people who are undecided and read a newspaper article, even an elegantly put together one like this, and this is what convinced them. The one thing that I would say is that we have actually received some interesting feedback from Trump country, from people who don't get their news from the New York Times. Fox News actually wrote a piece about this package, which was they sort of cut and pasted large chunks of the text itself, including like internal hyperlinks, and that got a lot of distribution on social media and in places where people don't read the New York Times every day, and they're used to a different media diet. We've heard from a lot of them, surprisingly, and some of the articles have resonated more than others. Farrah Stockman has an excellent piece here talking about Trump supporters and sort of saying, listen, there was a reason why people voted for Trump in 2016. It doesn't mean that they're going to vote for him now, but that people, should appreciate and acknowledge and understand that these are honorable, decent Americans who are very patriotic and saw something in Trump, an itch that needed scratching. And so I think it was really important to me to have that piece in this package, because this isn't just sort of, we don't want to preach to the choir. The choir is already singing their tune, right? We want to reach anybody who's willing to listen at this point and talk to them about what we view as a serious threat to our democracy. And I don't think there's any patriotic American who can't read this and appreciate the honesty and sort of the good faith that we bring to this argument.
Thank you. Lambert asks, any tips on how to write editorials?
I would say have a really good team of people around you, because these are all team sports. And I don't say this lightly. I have the luxury of working with some of the best people around to do this. And one of the things about writing editorials is it's a very, you have to leave your ego at the door. Anybody who's on the New York Times editorial board is a type A sort of personality. They're all very aggressive, hardworking, very accomplished journalists. But everybody has to leave that ego and self at the door a little bit when you write under a byline that's institutional, because you're serving, at the best of times, something bigger than yourself and something that's going to long outlive you. And to the credit for all the people that I work with is that they've accepted that challenge to sort of write things that are going to outlive them in a way, and write something that isn't going to be attributed to them. So as I said, I'm not going to say who were the people that went and wrote this editorial, because it is a team project. So all of us wrote this. That is sort of what we do on a daily basis. And anything that's unsigned is a product of a group and a product of a team. And for journalists who really like their brand and their social media and so forth and so on, to do that is not nothing. And really, kudos to all these people who are willing to check that at the door in service of these larger projects.
Thank you. Rachel says, are there ways to get this beyond your usual readers? It's so powerful and is newsworthy on its own.
Share it on social media, I suppose. Leave it in your doctor's office. I don't know. Listen, at a certain point, you work really hard on these things and you put your heart and soul into it, and then you put it out there for people to read and appreciate and share it with their friends, and send it to your crazy uncle who you want to, talk about at the Christmas dinner table. We put these things out because we feel they're important, and we feel that we can have a role and a voice, and we feel that these are arguments that need reckoning with. And so you don't have to agree with it, but we always appreciate people who are willing to read it and internalize it and think about it. And that's sort of how we see ourselves.
Thank
Alex,
you. Go ahead.
Before we leave the special section and wrap up, because I know that you need to get going, I want to share the front page of the section and have you talk a little bit about how this is interactive. So I'm going to pull that up real quick for folks and get this. Let's see.
While you're doing that, Neil, Mary asks, how can we get additional hard copies?
Oh, hard copies. I'm embarrassed to say I don't exactly know the specific details, but I do know that the Times has if you go to the website, they do have a link where you can get those. I'm not exactly, I just don't have the information in front of me, but I know that it is possible. And if you go to nytimes.com and scroll down at the bottom there, I think there's a thing on how you can get hard copies.
Great.
So I'm just going to refresh the screen here.
Oh, wow, look at that video. Very cool.
Tell us about that.
We saw that, yeah. So we had a whole bunch of different cover options. And when we saw this, we were just blown away. You know, I mean, you see something like that and I don't know. I mean, so the design team, again, these people are, you know, just incredible professionals, and they give you sort of, you know, 3 or 4 different options. And when we saw this, there was just no question that that's what we were going to do. And the fact that it was animated for the online presentation of it, just, you know, that was sort of overselling it at that point. It was just the choice was very clear.
And this is what it looks like online. Even going back, when you hover over the individual photo captions, all right, that picture just fills the screen, which is nice.
Yeah.
And then all of these are on one page. We showed them in print. We showed them the individual cards that I created. But all of this is one page for folks.
Nice. Pavan asks, were there any people on the editorial team who are pro-Trump or sympathetic to Trump, and what did they say or contribute to this?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into specifically what everybody on the board thinks, but yes, there are. The board is not in lockstep by any means on any sort of issue. I mean, there's rarely unanimous consent on anything, but it was definitely the consensus of the board on this particular thing that the Trump administration poses a threat to democracy that is unparalleled in modern times. There was no doubt about that. I mean, when you have this sort of proto-authoritarian who is trying to keep people away from the polls and you know, making calls to armed groups of people against the government of the United States, that there just isn't sort of any debate about the perilousness of the moment. And so, you know, that's, you know, the sentiment of the board is reflected in this section for sure.
Sudha, who is Neil's mom, Neil is Sudha's son, says, Alex, it's nice of you to give huge credit to your team. That shows your greatness.
Hi, Neil's mom. I appreciate that. No, I mean, these things are like, look, it's easy to sort of say, you know, it's a team effort. But again, as I said at the beginning, like the same group of people that put out this special section do this every week. So, you know, it's the content is different, but the photos are still great. And, you know, sometimes it's a unified theme and sometimes it's all together. And sometimes it's a whole bunch of different things that people are going to engage with. So listen, we're in service of the audience that subscribes to the Times and wants to have provocative thoughts. And sometimes that means giving you a whole bunch of stuff from Ross to Maureen to anybody else that is in the Sunday Review. And sometimes it warrants a special treatment like this. And on occasion we do it, and we hope it gets people talking.
Laura says incredibly powerful, and maybe this is the last comment before we hear your final thoughts. Lambert says, I'm not subscribed to the New York Times, but I'm giving up my cup of coffee today to get a copy, and will spend this week sharing within my community piecemeal. What a comment and a tribute to how you're inspiring people with this.
That's great. Love to hear it. I mean, again, you know, we see the work that we do as sort of inspiring those conversations and prompting debate and getting people to think a little bit. And I can tell you, as somebody who worked on a project like this, it's been consuming my brain power for a couple months, and I'm glad that it can intrude on people's consciousness for even a few moments. Is very gratifying to hear.
Thanks. I'm just looking at some more of these. Laura says, dumbfounded by those who praise the president despite his abrasive style, as if the style is the problem. And that's one of the things that we're seeing. Just powerful stuff. We had a question here that came in earlier. How does the team cope between personal and professional? Does the New York Times provide assistance in providing support? I guess asking about how you think about these issues, and is the question here.
Yeah, listen, I mean, it's a tough moment, but it's not just a tough moment for newspaper writers. I mean, we have a pretty good gig. We can remote into work, and we can do everything by Zoom, and I can do a lot of the work for the New York Times from the room that I'm in, but that's not the reality for everybody who works for the New York Times. There are people who go into our factories every day and put out this newspaper, and there are people who go into work every day and at risk of their own health and safety because they're essential workers. We see what we do as essential work, and for some of us who are fortunate that we can do it from a room like this, that's one thing. But people like me sitting in a room doesn't get the newspaper to your door. Those are the people who are, putting their health and safety and everything else at risk and doing the essential work that journalism needs to do at this moment.
Alex, I'm going to jump in. I think we lost your volume a little bit. Maybe we could step back just a little bit. I don't know why we lost your volume. I did want to just
Can you hear me now?
check. Yeah, I think we can hear. Try it again.
Yes, it's better now. Yeah.
And then just want to do a time check. I know that we had thought you'd have to leave right at 9:30. Can you stay a little longer with us? Can we?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was supposed to take my kid to soccer at 9:30, but because we're quarantined, I'm with you for another half hour or whatever you want.
That's great if you can. We can certainly look at the rest of the paper,
Neil, which will be cool. Yeah, I just wanted to show Wayne Kamadoy, one of the great designers at the time, says Alex describes the curation for print that occurs all the time: content versus aesthetics. Ron Thomas, one of our sponsors and former guest, says, "Wow, I thought the same as in the car dealership versus the food line." Wow, he lives in Dubai, an American in Dubai. You can imagine that it's just hard for people around the world to understand what exactly is happening here. This is that photograph. For folks who are joining in late, just imagine, I was 100% sure this was because it was about an economy in tatters. I thought these are unsold cars sitting in a parking lot.
That's what I thought, Sri.
Yeah, these are people waiting in line for food. So these cars are going to move up one car at a time to get and collect food and go home and feed their family. It's heartbreaking, Alex. Just how did we get here? God.
Food. Those people are waiting for food.
And this is America, which is incredible. Very powerful image, and as Sri and I both our experience, like I thought these were cars that couldn't be sold. I thought they were abandoned in the desert or something, kind of like planes go to the boneyard.
Yeah.
I think somewhere down in Arizona or something, California. So Sri, let's you want to take a look at the rest of the paper? Do you want to?
Yeah, we'd love to hear Alex talk about his colleagues on the other side of the of the aisle.
Without commenting on the news, of course, but because we want to respect that wall between editorial and news, right, Alex?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I read the front page. I'm not gonna snipe at it, but
you can comment on the news, not comment on the.
I love the news.
Yes, the decision making. What's the line? Talk a little bit about that, and kind of what you're trying to do in terms of respecting that line between news and editorial. It's important for people to remember. General readers, I think our New York Times read-along family understands the difference between news and editorial. and the Times makes it a point, this is the editorial section, this is the news section, facts, opinion, etc. How do you describe that difference?
Yeah, I mean the sort of overused phrase is church and state, and we like to keep a hefty, high, big wall between the two of them. If we were in the office, which we haven't been since March or so, we don't sit in the newsroom. We're on a different floor. We have our own set of copy editors. We have our own set of production people, web designers, photo editors, columnists, everything. It is separate. We're a separate sort of independent operation within the New York Times. So we all go to the same building and we all have the same email addresses, but that's about where the overlap ends. The newsroom does their thing and we do our thing, and we really keep it as separate as possible. We protect the newsroom from opinion, and the newsroom protects us from thinking about the brand in a way that isn't independent. So the newsroom is independent of us for a reason, and we strive really hard to keep those things as far away as possible. So everybody in opinion obviously reads what the newsroom does, but we don't have a heads up on it, and we're a separate operation. That's how we like it, and how we're going to keep it.
Well, and in that vein of not having a heads up, let's go back to this picture, because I know this is very meaningful to you. You first saw this picture was taken last June.
Yeah, it's just a heck of an image. And I think, I've got a kid who's about the age of Valeria there. And it just, when I first saw that picture, it just, hit me like a ton of bricks, just resonated beyond belief. And we discussed at the time writing an editorial or just using this picture as sort of a photo editorial in a way. We ended up not doing it because the newsroom put it on the front page and wrote about it because it was such a striking image. And I just don't see how anybody can look at that thing and read the story of what led up to it and not appreciate the humanity that's captured in that frame. It's just really something.
And in speaking about the,
I would just say really quick, yeah. So a lot of times we don't editorialize on something because the news story is an editorial in a sense. Not that it's opinionated, but that there's not a whole lot to say. When you have something like this, what is an opinion person going to say that photo doesn't tell you? Nothing. We have nothing to bring to that. And so that's why it was so striking. And again, this is that particular photo, that and the Merkel photo, was what prompted us to think about doing a photo section for this package. And there's some photos that just speak for themselves. That food line picture, man. I mean, if you need a whole special section of 11,000 words to tell you what to think about, that knowing that's a food line doesn't tell you, I don't know. I could write 11,000 words, but it's not going to convince you. Like if that photo doesn't sell it, I don't know. I got nothing.
Sure. So before we jump into the rest of the paper, we'll take care of a little business and give you a break, Alex. Just 2 minutes. We'll thank our sponsors first. Shri, can you talk a little bit about Muckrack?
Sure. We want to thank our friends at Muckrack Academy for helping me put together this free certification course for journalists and anyone. It's free. It's about 2 hours of work. You can do it in 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months, mrac.co/social. So please check that out.
And in addition to Muckrack, one of our other sponsors is Strategy Focus Group. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Ron Thomas, who is watching from Dubai, is with Strategy Focus Group. Thank you again, Ron, for your support. If you're interested in being a sponsor of the New York Times Read Along, please contact Shri at digimentors.group, or myself, Neil Parekh, neil@digimentors.group. And to learn more about our sponsors, you can click on these links, readalong.link/muckrack or readalong.link/strategy focus group. thank you again for your support. And of course, it's always important to pay the bills. Want to get back to our conversation with Alex Kingsbury, Editorials Editor of the New York Times, and now commentator on the front page, if you will. So let's take a look at the front page together.
This display story, and we'll put that in full screen real quick.
We got it. Yep.
Thank you, Shri. So Shri, if you haven't been able to tell, Shri and I are handing off directing duties today. Total spending by candidates in states. So it's an election-focused story showing where people are, where the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign are spending their money. Florida, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin seem to be the focus. And I'll see if I can get better light on the paper. The lead is infections in U.S. and Europe show troubling trend. And this is, with COVID-19, it looks like numbers are spiking again. Is it going to be over? Months on, rising rates collide with fatigue and frustration. Again, Biden eclipses Trump in the war for the airwaves. There's an article about supremacy. Divide grows over a phrase. Anything here jump out at you, Alex? This NFL story, the Boo Birds are all cooped up. Joe Biden's non-radical 60s. What are you seeing when you see this front page? And yeah.
I was just going to say the graphic there is really striking. About it's hard to it's hard to do maps of the United States. It's such a common sort of image that everybody kind of knows what you're seeing, and you kind of look past it. But I have to say, when I saw this at the bodega where I picked up a copy of the Times today, it was, to have that above the fold, to do an image of the United States, it's really got to be kind of something to make it stand out. And just here, you kind of even knew what this was without actually reading it, which is, to me, the mark of really good visual journalism, is to sort of say, like, oh, wow, not only does it sort of catch your eye, but it also sort of tells you what to think about it before you even read all the captions. So I just thought that was taking the outline of the United States and really elevating it a little bit, because what I like about it is it pulls your eye really through it. So if you look, so I'm from Maine, so obviously that's the first place that I look, but it pulls your eye down the East Coast and then across into the Midwest with the circles, right? So you're going to go down to Florida and then up as the circles, but because they've done the shading of the different states, it also pulls you around from the Northeast down through the Sun Belt into the Midwest and then or into the West and then back up through the Dakotas there. So like visually, that for me is a really striking image, and the way the reason that it works is because it pulls your eye all around it. So that I'm kind of a visuals geek in a lot of ways, but that was the first thing this morning when I spilled my coffee on some of the front page, but that was sort of how my eye got pulled through it. So I'm always really interested visually in where your eye goes first, where it goes second, where it goes third, and this image just really pulls you right around in a circle. So kudos to whoever, I can't read the caption line, but whoever pulled that off was really good.
That'd be Wayakal, Denise Liu, and Jugal Patel.
Yeah,
are the credits on that. I'll say it's hard to tell. I don't think you can tell on screen, but each of those circles are actually red and blue. So if you look closely, you can actually see Republican and Democrat spending in each of those states. It's a little faint. It's not a very high contrast, but it really does. There's enough to draw you in and make you look at what's there.
Neil, you're right. I thought it was a black and white front page today, but now I can see little hints of red.
It's just like, even if I get close enough, you lose the focus, but you see the red and the blue.
It's really subtle with the hashtag, with the hashing on there too. It's just
the states that have the hashing. There's a key states that Trump flipped, so they go Biden spent more than Trump if it's a blue circle with a red inside, which makes sense. Trump spent more than Biden if it's a red outside. Georgia is the only state where it looks like Trump spent more than Biden. A couple of states are almost even. And then the ones with the hashing are states that Trump flipped in 2016. And you also have, the amount spent is based on the size of the circle. So really, they're doing a lot with this one graphic, which is interesting. They're really covering a lot. Inside the paper, we have the On This Day in History, Mother Teresa of Calcutta wins Peace Prize. They have these interesting sections, Alex, the On This Day in History. On the bottom left, they have the Of Interest, which is meant to draw people into the paper. If they only read page 2, they see little snippets about during this first week of September, right before the moratorium from the CDC kicked in, eviction filings exceeded the norm by 310% in Richmond, Virginia. Matthew McConaughey landed his breakthrough role in Dazed and Confused. That's the cover of Arts and Leisure, rather. The world's population is expected to start shrinking in about 45 years, leading you to the book review. These are all ways to make the paper more accessible, only available in print. The Conversation, Spotlight, this sketchbook, which is interesting, and then also Quote of the Day. In the spring, it was fear and a sense of we are all in it together. Things are different now. Fear has really been replaced with fatigue. That's the quote. Try and get it without the shadow. That's the quote right there.
We have a question from Rick. What's the best New York Times editorial piece or op-ed on patriotism, fake and true patriotism? Do you remember one of those?
Fake and true patriotism. God, that's a tough one. I don't know. I'd like to think that we're all sort of. I'd like to think it's all sort of patriotic. I can say one of I think one of the last signed pieces that I wrote was something that I did in must have been February or March about a really good friend of mine who was my editor in my college newspaper, and he joined the military during 9/11 or right after 9/11. He was there in DC and watched the Pentagon burning across the river and signed up and joined the Army. And he and I have known each other since 98 or 99 or whatever, and have had this long running sort of conversation about what patriotism is. And I wrote a full page. They gave me the full page on one of these Sundays or some day of the week to write. It was Sunday to write about this guy, and he's in Afghanistan as we speak. Maybe he's watching. Hi, Richard, in Kabul. He's in the military. He joined after 9/11. And he was a prison guard at Abu Ghraib. Then he became a military lawyer, and then he realized that the law wasn't for him and became a social worker in the military, which is an odd sort of career change. But he basically works now to prevent soldiers from committing suicide and doing the really important work of mental health. And to be honest, I can't think. Yeah, that's the one right there.
Wow.
I visited him at Fort Drum in February, just before all this happened, or in January, and just before he shipped off for, I don't know, who knows how many tours it's been at this point. But he's there, doing the work that patriots do, and I can't think of more patriotic people than that. And it's not a sort of thank you for your service sort of piece. This guy's been through a whole lot. As everybody in my generation who's been through the war on terror and so forth and so on. So I think the work that we do of telling those sorts of stories are really important, and I think of them as patriotic, and I hope other people do as well.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'm so glad we're able to show everyone this piece. My friend lives inside the war on terror. Listen to him. Captain Richard Murphy, and this is Alex's article
Major Richard Murphy. He has recently been promoted, so
nice.
Hooray for that.
Yes, absolutely. Mark's watching from Durham, North Carolina. Stefan says, the New York Times graphics department has always done such amazing work, and multimedia has now made them shine now more than ever. And Stefan is a former New York Times photo editor for 20 years. And Linda said earlier that Times does the best data visualization. So great to have all of these comments. And Paula has put in a link to that article that you were referring to, so people can take a look at it.
That's great. If you want to talk about great photo editing, can you flip to page, I think it's 4 today in the Times? There's a great, oh yeah, that's it right there. So look at the photo editing here. So this is an amazing shot. It's in India, right? I think.
Yeah.
So
this is jogging along Rajpath, a ceremonial avenue at New Delhi's heart on a smoggy morning last week.
Okay.
The combined impact of a respiratory virus and respiratory contaminants has health experts worried.
Yeah, I saw this morning and I was like, wow, that is great photo editing, because that lead image is amazing. But what makes this whole display really great is if you just scroll down a little bit, so you have this silhouetted landscape picture, and then you have the one right below it, which is shot at 90 degrees of this guy getting the test. It's just a beautiful juxtaposition of those two things. So you have a respiratory virus with the smog and the running, which is beautiful, and then you have this one right below it. Like, kudos to that photo editor too. That's really great work. So
it's not just the individual photo, but it's the whole layout. It's the juxtaposition. The rest of the page, you're showing this anti-smog gun spraying atomized water into the air, and then you see someone from a hospital.
Yeah, isn't that great? Right? I mean, like, that was a whole lot of thought went into that, and it's really just an excellent execution, I thought.
So this is I think this is a good story in and of itself. I mean, tracking the outbreak, coverage of India is something that I've paid attention to over the years. There have been several approaches. When you turn the page, there's this story, which, I want to get your thoughts on. I don't know if you saw it online. Worshipful fan of Trump was faithful until death. This is a story of someone who thought of Trump as a god, apparently. And when he got coronavirus, he started fasting, praying for his health. And he died.
Trump's health.
He had a heart attack.
Yeah, he was praying for Trump's health, yeah.
He was praying for Trump's health, and he died. Shri, any thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I tweeted this out. So it's about a week ago since this has happened, but now it's in the paper of record for America. So lots of people will now see this. This man was actually pretty famous for being a Trump super fan in India. There are many people like this. And he built a 6-foot tall statue to Trump, as you can see there, and would worship it and celebrate it and all of that. And then this poor guy, because of his own, faith in Trump, that he wanted to do his part by fasting. In India, that's something that people do as, something you do for the gods on occasion and for other reasons. And so he fasted and then he died. This is in the long list of things that Trump is responsible for. Here's another. And it's a tragedy for this man's family. I mean, some people online have been laughing about this and talking about, Darwinism and everything else. But just imagine the family and everything else that goes into this, that Trump has lied to the world for 5 years and longer. And that's why the editorial that Alex and his team have put together is so important, that people understand the full con that has happened here. And as Alex said, this is now documented for posterity. Signs are that Trump will lose, but I don't believe that things are as sure as people seem to think they are. I think that things are much, much tighter, and there's a chance that Trump will win again. And it's important to document all this now, because we don't know what's going to happen and how long it'll be before we know who the president is, and if he'll leave, if he loses, all of that. There's lots of things to worry about. And this is just one image and one story in this terrible, terrible 5 years we've had.
So Shri, I had a very different take on this article. Looking at and thinking of the history of at times, New York Times coverage of India, I saw this and said to myself, oh my God, there was somebody who worshipped Trump as a god and built a statue to him and fasted, praying for his recovery. This seemed to me to fall into the category of, effectively of making fun of crazy people in India. The history of stories, this is exotic, this is strange, this is weird. That's what I thought of when I saw this story. It seemed to reek of that kind of Orientalism.
Well, except that this is about our president and connects directly to that. I mean, this, as I said, this is a man who's pretty well known in kind of Trump circles and Trump worshipfulness. So here Wayne says, speaking of photo editing, take a look at the Metropolitan section on hot rods. A picture editor, Jeff Furcicella, maximizing the impact of an image. So we'll give you a chance to get to that. And meanwhile, let's go back to Alex.
We'll see if I have the.
Can I just say something really quick about the India guy?
Please, Alex.
Because it for me, somebody asked an earlier question about is there disagreement on the board about this or that. We don't ask a lot of the people that join the editorial board at the Times, but one of the things that everybody brings to it is a sense of empathy. And, I don't think that anybody can look at some of the stuff that's happened during the Trump administration and not be empathetic about it. If you go back to the early 1900s or the 1800s and read descriptions of snake oil, right? It's a thing. Right? I mean, snake oil is a thing. And the reason people buy snake oil is because they're willing to do anything to make pain stop. And so I think we need to be really empathetic for people who latch on to things because they think it can help them, because nothing else is doing that. And so one of the things that I like to think about during the Trump years is that there's a reason that people are gravitating towards Donald Trump. And some of those things are surely in bad faith and for bad reasons, but there's a reason that people are searching for something that society right now isn't providing them. And I think we need to think about that. And if people are drawn to snake oil, I think we need to question and interrogate why that is and what it is that they're not getting elsewhere that Donald Trump is providing them. So this guy is sort of part of a larger story here, and I think Farah's piece sort of gets to that. But listen, the American dream isn't working for a lot of people. And, if that's 20% of the population or 40% or whatever, it needs to be more inclusive. And the fact that it isn't explains a little bit of why people are willing to flock to a demagogue. So I hope that this project gets people to interrogate that question a little bit, because whoever wins in November is still going to govern a country and still hopefully going to be president to an entire country, that doesn't necessarily think Donald Trump is the worst person in the world. And so, we have a very diverse country that we all need to bring together and move forward with. And so I think a little bit of empathy towards people, even people who are really bought into Donald Trump's cult of personality, is not just warranted, but really, really important, especially at a time like this.
Good point, Alex. I want to go to Wayne's request to show from the New York section when you're outside of the metropolitan region. But I'm glad that we have. It's only 2 pages for me out here in Virginia. But this is the photo editing Wayne wanted to point out. A guerrilla car meets noise is the point. This is about hot rods. So it's a great picture of by Brittany Newman for the New York Times, and then other pictures on the page below as well.
Noise is the point is a great headline too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Here's a question from Mark. Either now or historically, what do you think is the best editorial about civil rights the Times has written?
I'd need a team of researchers to go back and do that. I just don't have it on the tip of my tongue. I would say the most important civil rights stuff that we've done recently is particularly on voting. We've hit this drum again and again and again and again and again, and it is some of the most, eat your spinach sort of newspaper writing, because it's really boring, and talking about procedural limitations of the census when it comes to appropriations of voting blocks is really super boring. But it's one of the things that the publisher feels strongly about, Katie feels strongly about, I feel strongly about. We're going to keep hitting the voting thing again and again and again, because there's really nothing more fundamental to a democracy than the right to vote. It's a civil right, and we need to treat it as such. So that's, I would just point that out as, something that we've done recently. There's a couple hundred, there's a lot of Times editorials on civil rights, but most immediately and most pressingly, that's what I think people really need to be focused on. I mean, John Lewis said it pretty clearly, like, the work is not done. We need to ensure that all Americans have the right to vote. And that is a project for anybody who's concerned about civil rights.
One of the things you had mentioned earlier, that Abraham Lincoln in the New York Times, and people can go to the Times machine, as they call it, and you can go back and read every mention of Abraham Lincoln starting in 1850 something. And I was looking for the actual editorial. I can't, because they don't spell it out the way we do now. It's a little bit harder to tell, but this is fascinating to just look at these and see articles about the election and the disunion problem and all of this. And this is all available to anyone who can just get this on the New York Times website. It's fascinating, and lots of opportunity for those of you who really care about history to go in here and look at the presidential campaign and look at those columns of type.
What I think is really cool when you go back to those is to read the editorial, but then read all the stuff that's sort of blurred out. So you learn a whole lot about that point in history by reading the other things that are going on at the page at the same time. And that's where, like, you might find some snake oil advertisements in there. I mean, like, to understand the context of those editorials, if you want to be originalist about it, right? You need to understand where those people were at. And you only get that by reading the stuff that's blurred out there, the society goings on, or the, what's happening with a new bridge construction or whatever it is. That really, Ken Burns style really puts you back in what it was like in the 1860s. It's
Paul,
really cool.
The link to the Times machine. And Wayne says, by the way, just that article about car meets and hot rod meets, you have to see the New York edition, because the page was sideways in the New York Times print edition. So that's pretty amazing. Patricia has a question. Who has been Alex's most memorable mentor?
Memorable mentor? Oh, I don't know. I for a very brief and overstated time, I was a war correspondent in Iraq, sort of before the surge and during the surge and after the surge. And I had an editor, a guy named Terry Atlas, and he was there. If I needed to call that guy because there'd been something bad that happened, I knew that there was somebody back in DC who had my back. And, it wasn't he was my boss, but when you do things like covering wars, to know that somebody's going to pick up your phone at any hour of the day and talk you down and talk you through something, you can't ask much more as a journalist. So, now that I have people reporting to me, I always keep the phone on, because I knew how important it was for me at that moment. And, it's not just wars, like the business that we're in, covering COVID or mass shootings or whatever it is. There's a lot of trauma that goes with this business. And so if you're in charge of people who are out there marinating in this sort of stuff, it's important to know that you've got their back. And, I sort of get up every morning hoping to aspire to be the guy who picks up the phone when somebody needs it. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Beautifully put. Laura says, yes, love to read the Times Machine articles. Have found some interesting paths crossing. I do want to ask you about the piece of art on your wall that says, "What a scandal."
There's a friend of ours in DC who did that. It's a rendering of my wife. To be honest, though, she doesn't have blonde hair. She made a remark at a party, and he made a whole set of these. They're actually, I think they're 3 or 4. Just a guy in DC who does who works for the government and does pop art on the side, and we really like this one, so we've dragged it around to all the different places we've lived at.
And it's perfect for your editorial cover, what you're talking about.
I have some cool, like they're black and white photos of Boston there on the side. I don't know if you can see those. But.
I see those. Yeah, so those are Boston.
Yeah.
We don't need to see those, Alex. That's okay. That's not really important.
Neil's a big Yankees fan, so he's worried that they'll be sending you.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I retweeted Carolyn Ryan retweeted the greatest New York Times page of all time, which was when the Sox won the series the other day. So,
I'll say for our readers, Alex and I we're talking yesterday. I think it was 2.5 hours total. It wasn't until 2 hours in that baseball came up, and luckily we had established a good rapport by then. Otherwise, this would have gone a whole lot differently.
Therese says, thank you for your focus on the importance of voting and guaranteeing all Americans have access to the polls, a hard-fought civil right and constitutional right that many take for granted. Therese works with Justice Aid Forum that's doing incredible work this year on the importance of voting. Mark asks, how will you describe this era to future generations?
Oof. I don't know. I think that's kind of the work I get up and do every day, right? We're writing it down. I think of the work that we do at the Times as writing the stuff that people are going to go back and Google in 150 years, and hopefully they'll understand a bit of what it's like to live in 2020. And as I said, hopefully they'll read the editorials, but hopefully they'll also read the other stuff that's going on the pages, because 2020 is not just our political moment. There's more going on here than Donald Trump. And if you read the full New York Times on Sunday, you see hot rods and you see movies and you see all the rich cultural life that the United States has to offer. So that's what we're passing on to future generations. It's not just, arguments about, if the deficit's important, right? I mean, we're a rich, deep, broad society that has a lot to offer the world and a lot to write down for history. And I hope people go back and read all of it.
Paula found your former editor, Carrie Atlas's Twitter handle and put that on there.
Oh, so. God, don't tell him what I said.
One thing that I've been thinking about, you're pretty optimistic that we are going to be around 150 years and people are going to, because some ways, looking at what happens after the election, we worry about, will there be a country after this? Is there a possibility of a civil war? All of that. But I love your optimism, so that's good.
Well, there'll be something after this, and hopefully they'll have the internet and the Wayback Machine, right?
Yeah, Laura's saying after she's registering voters all last week, she met a woman whose mother tried to register in rural Alabama in the 50s. She was turned away because she could neither recite the preamble nor correctly guess the number of jelly beans in a large jar. It sounds like a perfect metaphor for what some people have to go through today. Well, horrifying.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Somebody also had a really good comment before about the food lines that you can donate to your local food pantry and food banks and stuff. Really important. So, everybody act locally and think globally, such as it is.
I think that's great. So we'll this time we will let you go, Alex. Give us a couple of final thoughts, and we'll look at a little bit of the rest of the paper, but we'll let you go. Give us some final thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank everybody who paid attention to the nerdy world of journalism and the Times, and if we can make your Sunday a little more interesting over a cup of coffee, I think we've done our job. So read us, tweet about us, think about us, tell us what we're doing right and wrong, and let the conversation continue.
Thank you. At A Kingsbury NYT on Twitter. Thank you for giving us this time. We wish you and your family the very best, and of course your team as well. we need your voice, and we're so glad to have it here with us today. And good luck to everyone who is going to try and vote in the next few days. I think you've laid out a wonderful, clear, scary case why Donald Trump should not be reelected.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks very much, and we'll see you soon, Alex. Bye-bye. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We have, if Neil has a moment, maybe he'll show us what else is in the paper. We really didn't get to talk much else because what Alex did and his team have put together is so important. So everyone, please check that out. Neil showing us the learning section, 8 ways that remote learning will shape the future. It is already happening, right? So that's interesting. What else? What other cover stories? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to show this in particular, Sri, because the learning section is not, it is online, but it's not a special separate section. It's harder to find all the articles in one place. So I always thought it's interesting. I always think it's interesting to show what they have in print. Innovation will be endless. It won't matter where you live. Even they talk about snow days. Snow days will be a thing of the past. There's no reason to not go to school. Nice centerfold. We won't stop talking about it. Parents, teachers, etc. School will be much smaller. Kitchen table small. That is. There's number 5. Number 6. Little ones will learn in new ways. That's going to be definitely interesting. Colleges will consider the full picture, and sports will find flexibility. All of the impacts of COVID-19 on learning. In terms of the other sections, the Sunday Business has a cover story. Black products, black shoppers, black workers, but who owns the store? At a Chicago beauty supply shop, one American dream has come true. Another is still waiting for its chance. Obviously, the juxtaposition. I think it was a Korean store owner, I believe, yeah, and African American shopper and worker. There is, the most important thing I wanted to make sure we got to was the magazine, because it also connects to what we were talking about in terms of the special section, end our national crisis. Free speech will save our democracy. And as we always do, we want to show the video, the behind the cover video. So I'm going to tee that up real quickly, Sri.
While you do that, let me just share some of these amazing comments and also tell you about next week's program. Jonathan says, provocative program, thank you. Linda says, fabulous guest, thank you. Steve, one of our producers, says, thank you so much to our guest, Alex Kingsbury, for joining us, and where you can follow him. And Lambert says, one of the best editions since I started following this program, really love it. This is 5 years of the New York Times read along, folks. Please tag your friends. They can watch this now or later. Hit retweet, share, put it on your Facebook stories so that people can learn. And great interview show, New York Times not arrived yet. Looking forward to reading it. And Sudha says, thank you and your team for bringing outstanding guests through this platform. And thank you for being a wonderful supporter of the show. So talking about guests, we have a fabulous guest for next week. We have an Amy joining us, Amy Padnani. The name Amy means something to both Neil and Sudha because Neil will tell us that his sister's name is Amy. And Amy Padnani is an editor on the Obituaries desk. She's creator of Overlooked, a series that tells the stories of remarkable people whose deaths were originally not reported by the New York Times, including many, many women, people of color, etc., whose story was not included in the obituaries from 1851 onward. So we will meet Amy Padnani next week. Please follow her on Twitter and connect with her. And this is next Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And Patricia says, happy anniversary. And Mark says, you folks are amazing. Another great guest. And Mark says, I saw a major African-American business person announced his run for mayor of New York. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in New York in the mayoral run is next year in 2021. So Neil is ready with the New York Times Magazine. They put together a video every week of how the story behind the cover. So let's watch this.
From the New York Times Magazine.
This is behind the cover.
Our cover story this week by Emily Bazelon is about the tension between this country's absolutist interpretation of freedom of speech and the spread of disinformation in a digital age. A particular locus of the problem is social media. It's not the cause, but it certainly is an amplifier of disinformation. We were planning to do a piece on the cover this week about President Trump. When he came down with the coronavirus, we weren't sure what course that would take.
Yeah.
So we had to do a last-minute switch and try to finish this story quickly.
The idea behind the cover was to make a very strong, bold statement about free speech and democracy, and then call it into question.
This is inherently a provocative idea.
We were walking a fine line here, right? Not wanting to come out and look like the New York Times is against free speech, but also wanting to make a statement about how it's affecting politics in the digital space.
I think that when readers encounter this cover, it may seem controversial, it might seem provocative, and in a sense, that's kind of the point. But it will also instinctively make sense to a lot of people. You know, increasingly, we live in a kind of information cesspool, and that really creates profound challenges for how we interpret the First Amendment.
Wow, so interesting. I can't wait to read it in print and online. We want to just remind everyone that this is part of our 5 years celebration of the New York Times Read Along. We don't always have guests from the New York Times, and we don't only want guests from the New York Times, but we are doing a series. We had Neil Genslinger last Sunday. We had Alex Kingsbury today. We have Amy Padnani next week. All of this as we celebrate 5 years of the New York Times Read Along, reading it out loud, in part to celebrate print, to celebrate what is happening in the importance of news and facts in everything we do. That story that Neil's now showing us, what's inside the magazine as well. So thank you to all who've made us want to do this every single week. And we've learned so much in the process. And also a reminder that we do this as a labor of love, but our company does virtual events and talk shows for all kinds of folks. Let me just pause here for a second before I tell you about this Wesley Morris piece. So if we've done events for 50 people and virtual events for 100,000 people, we would love to talk to you about your event. If you're working on a conference, or you know someone who's working on a conference, please let us know. You've seen the full production values that we can bring. This is not a Zoom call. This is a very special way in which we are able to bring the full force of the Digimentors team here. So I encourage all of you, if you know anyone who is working on a conference or wants a talk show of their own, please get in touch with me, Sri@Sri.net, so that we can talk to you. We love geeking out on these, and multiple folks who do this kind of go from one Zoom call to another have said how much they love being on our show and seeing what we're doing on our platform. So please get in touch with us. And now let's tell you about the Wesley Morris story about his mustache. He grew a pandemic mustache, as many people have, and he talked about how it connected him with his blackness. And he's a fabulous writer, so I won't give more of it away. Please read this story. You can easily find it online. And
let's take a moment, Shri, just to admire the layout and the photography. Talk about a close-up going across a 2-page spread just of his mustache. I mean, and that's I'm just curious, as I obviously have a goatee. This is a pre-pandemic goatee that I have. As folks might know, but I'm just thinking about, preparing for this close-up shot, how closely he would have shaved and prepared for this. I don't know that I'd want a shot like this for me.
And a very high-res photograph. Yeah, and here.
And then there are images of other Black men: John Lewis, Martin Luther King Jr., Gordon Parks, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Bayard Rustin, and Thurgood Marshall. and their mustaches. And then these are color photos of Jesse Jackson, Denzel Washington, Carl Weathers, Donnie Simpson, Muhammad Ali. I don't remember Muhammad Ali with a mustache. And Alfonso Ribeiro.
And Alfonso
so
is one of the actors in Will Smith's show,
Yes.
The Prince of Bel-Air.
So this is the cover story from the front page. Freedom of speech will preserve our democracy, with little warnings that come up. Independent fact check. The evidence is to back free speech claims is disputed. Get the facts about the First Amendment. Additional reporting on the following pages disputes the accuracy of this statement. So it was interesting that they use flags, these warnings, on their own article, effectively. And this is the First Amendment in an Age of Disinformation by Emily Bazelon. So we'll just take a look at this again. The way they laid it out with the black outline and the white background for the text is really interesting. And this is a different. I think this is part of it. Evicting the landlord. So again, they do a sideways headline. This COVID-19 has revealed the depths of the nation's rental housing. This is a different story, rental housing crisis. But a group of Minneapolis tenants has shown that a different future is possible. So this is really, really interesting to lay it out like this. I don't think I've seen this before, having some articles with a different color outline to differentiate it as we flip through.
Therese, we're throwing in a nice comment here. Digimentors produced Justice Aid's Interactive Film Forum, a terrific event. Thanks, Sri, Neil, and Stefan. Great result and great to work with. So kind, thank you. And Debbie says, Sundays with Sri and Neil, what the times demand with the TCAPs. Very clever, Debbie. Thank you for that. Debbie is our former neighbor in our building in New York, now lives in DC, closer to Neil. And
So, yeah, down here in Arlington, we actually had a chance to visit her. This is an example of virtual friends from our New York Times read-along community. Emily and I got to visit her when we were selling Girl Scout cookies, and she was kind enough to buy some. So thank you, Debbie. As we're approaching 10:20, Shri, and I know that you have She's on Call to produce at 11 o'clock. I'd like to do something we haven't had a chance to do in a while. Read the poem as we close. So you tell me if you can see it clearly enough. You can certainly read it. If not, I'll be happy to do it.
No, I'd love for you to read it. Please go ahead. Before you do that, let me just remind everyone, She's on Call is this terrific show that will start at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. My dear friends and who happen to be surgeons, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian, will be interviewing great guests today. And the show is doing so well that it's rebroadcast on WBUR radio, 99.5 FM on Mondays at 2 p.m. and worldwide on WBAI.org. So please check them out at 11 a.m. Eastern and go to @She's on Call. All right, are you ready to read the poem, Neil?
I'm ready. So, Shri, I'll read the poem if you do your introduction as you usually do.
Sure. So we love reading the poems on the New York Times Read Along, but I've always said that poetry should be read by a scholar of the poet or by the poet herself or himself. Here, Neil is going to read this with zero prep. He'll get pronunciations wrong. He may get the meter wrong, the rhyming wrong, all of that. Not his fault. He's reading this blind. We tell, as we say, don't try this at home, folks. Here we go.
And so I'm going to read it. I'm not even going to read the intro text, Shri. I usually read the intro text first to get a couple clues, but I'll do it Shri style. A Letter from Never Before by Ted Kuzer. It arrived with the rest of the mail in our box by the road, came bearing a standard forever stamp. A little American flag and the letter handwritten in pencil. You don't know me, it opened. Never before have I written to you. It had a quaint syntax, its rhythm like that of a waltz that was ever so gracefully taking me into its arms. It had no past to offer, only the present, as if everything started from there. With that never before, and this on such an ordinary day, a few clouds, birds flying high in the clouds. Then this, a few words of thanks, carefully chosen and shaped with a number 2 pencil, which I knew had been recently sharpened. All this from a stranger, setting out for forever, from never before. That was a letter from never before by Ted Kuzer, selected by Naomi Shihab Nye, the Young People's Poet Laureate of the Poetry Foundation in Chicago. And her description: is anyone more devoted to the Postal Service than the tribe of poets who started their lives sending poems out through the mail and then spent their time awaiting the return of self-addressed stamped envelopes? We praise boxes with red flags, tiny mail keys in apartments, anticipation of arrivals, and our trusty post people. In this haunting Ted Kuzer poem from his 15th collection of poems, Red Stilts, the recipient dances gently with the message he has received. A wide world grows intimate again through one reaching out voice. Though being connected is so much easier now than it used to be, the necessity and diligence of the National Postal Service deserves nothing but gratitude. And I would agree. I think that the Postal Service deserves an incredible amount of gratitude. And we saw attacks on the Postal Service earlier in the year, about a month ago, I think it was, Shri.
And they continued even today. So that's
and it continues.
By the way, on the right, that's an interview with Don DiDilillo about pinch and paranoia in the pandemic. It's going to be difficult to return what we might term as ordinary. So this is an interview that I'm sure people would love to read. Patricia says, thanks, Sri, Neil, Julia, Steve, Carla, Paula, for making this show possible and sharing the wealth of knowledge. Grateful. So folks, if you like this, you can help us out in a couple of ways. One, please hit share so that your friends and family can watch this live or later. Tell your friends about the show. Number 2, the other thing you can do is hire us to do your virtual events. And number 3 is we have got a community of thousands of people who watch every week. So if you know anyone who would like to be a sponsor, we'd love to have them sponsor us. The rates are very reasonable. And also we can tie it all in together with this. My daily COVID show, which comes up tonight. We have another Sunday Night Positivity episode. We've done today's 222 episodes in 222 days. So we'd love, that's at 9 p.m. Eastern, so please join us for that. We'd love your continued support of everything we do. And a reminder again that next week we have Amy Padnani with us, an editor on the obituaries desk, as we continue to celebrate 5 years of the New York Times read along. And also Sundays are a day when we send out our newsletter, and that would have gone out this morning at 8 a.m. So if it's in your inbox, please open it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do srinet.substack.com, srinet.substack.com, and we'd love to have you subscribe to the newsletter as well. So with that,
before we close, Shri, I want to make a point of personal privilege, just commenting on the remarks of Senator David Perdue yesterday, as people may have seen on the internet, when he was referring to the Democratic vice presidential nominee. He mangled her name on purpose, claimed ignorance. He served in the Senate with her for 3 years. He knows how to say her name. Kamala, Bamla, whatever he said, and laughed it off. This struck a chord for a lot of people, and it's not just people who are Indian or Asian American. There are a number of people who have had their names mangled several times. There's a little meta moment for you there. Shri's calling up his Twitter account. What I wanted to do is to ask let people know there's a hashtag #MyNameIs that people have been using to say their name, to explain the background of their name. Shri, can I ask you to pronounce your name and say a little bit about your name first, and then I'll go after that?
Sure. So this was from yesterday when I was so upset to see this. Here, Simranjit Singh saying, "My name is Simran. It means divine remembrance." And here's Meena Harris, the senator's niece, talking about her name. And Anjali Mehrotra. You can see so many people were doing this. Gautam Raghavan, Mini Timaraju, and I did this as well. And so my name, Srinath, Srinivasan, are both names of the Hindu god Vishnu. But the point I was trying to make is that little white boys used to make fun of my name when I arrived in New York City as a kid. But now it's one thing for little white boys to do it on the playgrounds in New York City, and another thing entirely for a Republican senator to mock his own colleague. This is the state that we have reached in this country, and I blame this directly on the president. We've had other incidents, obviously, long before this president, including another Senate candidate who said macaca to describe an Indian American. But what you're seeing now is the normalization of this. And to have it on a national stage, international stage, is what's so upsetting. But Neil, you tell us about your name.
Absolutely, thank you, Shri. So my first name is easy enough, and it's my given name, Neil. And as a point of trivia, is actually named after Neil Armstrong. No middle name, but my last name has often. It's one thing. It's interesting that people in our family actually pronounce it different ways. I pronounce it Parek. When you call family and listen to voicemails, you'll hear 4 different versions of that. But what I've experienced is people intentionally getting it wrong, calling it paprika, parika, parquet, and there's just no need for that. If you don't know how to pronounce someone's name, you can ask. You can see what is their preference, even among friends, and even with as I'm going to try and say, Sri versus a hard Shri, SHREE. You can mispronounce the name, but I would never intentionally trip on your name or make fun of it. It's just there's just no reason to do it, much less in political discourse. It's an effort, and other people have done this with other candidates, highlighting the fact that they are foreign, highlighting the fact that they don't belong here. I remember 25 years ago, if I'm doing my math right, 1994, 26 years ago, working on Ram Upaluri's campaign for Senate in Tennessee. His father was Japanese, his mother was Indian. His father was Indian, his mother was Japanese. Upaluri was his last name. And when people asked him about his last name, he said, well, if someone by the name of Estes Kefauver can run for vice president in Tennessee, this is back in the 60s, Upaluri shouldn't be that hard to say. And it really isn't. I want to note Jonathan said that his name gets mangled daily, and I can see how that might happen with his last name. So it's just something I want to draw people's attention to. And Paula shared a link to the My Name Is Shri's tweet, and also the My Name Is hashtag. So take a look at that if you get a chance, and offer your own thoughts.
And some amazing folks like Preet Bharara have also tweeted about that. His real name is Pretinder, and I can imagine being a young boy in America would not have been easy with that name. We thought about that when we named our children Krishna and Durga, what it would be like for them. So we certainly thought about it in what we did. Just also want to, as someone pointed out on Twitter, if people can say Schwarzenegger, they can say Kamala. Like, this is willful and on purpose what that senator did, who's up for re-election. And by the way, we keep saying in this country that the Senate is the more cultured and more sophisticated chamber, whereas the House is filled with, people who are bombastic and not serious people. The Senate is a more serious place. Paula has found Preet Bharara's tweet, and preach. I remember when folks couldn't say Barack, and let's never forget that this president is the one who fueled the birtherism of President Obama, the rumors and the stories that he was not an American only because he was black. And that started happening, but was quelled when Kamala Harris was announced as well. There were people who were trying to restart the birtherism. And if she, in fact, does become vice president, you can imagine that will be restarted by people like the president and others. All right, I've got to go. I want everyone to tune in at 11 a.m. Take a break and tune in for a fabulous episode of She's on Call, doctors talking about COVID-19 and so much more. And there it says, my name is not pronounced, I can't say that. And there she is. Dr. Chandrasekhar is one of our hosts of She's on Call, and I'm going to go sit in the co-director's chair with our fabulous directors and producers, including Vandana Menon, Julia Weeks, and Rose Horowitz, and the co-executive producers and hosts, Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian. So let's say goodbye and remind everyone, Neil, about next week's show.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sri. Next week's show is going to be another great episode. Amy Padnani is an editor on the obituaries desk, but she's the creator of Overlooked, a series that tells the stories of remarkable people whose deaths were not originally reported on by the New York Times. I think it was about a year ago that they started that project, and it'll be a great follow-up to having Neil Genslinger on the show last week. And he mentioned the fact that Amy joined the desk and brought a fresh outlook and a different perspective to the obituaries desk. So look forward to you joining us next week, and we will close today's show. And I think there's just one other comment.
I'll just say NYT
please.
Amy. Follow her at NYT Amy. NYT
Amy, exactly. And we have that in the ticker for you to catch. Deborah was saying Say Their Names has a double meaning now in terms of what you do on the COVID-19 call every night, saying the names of African Americans who have been killed in violence, in hatred, and Neil Genslinger is watching, and he's looking forward to having Amy join us next week. Thank you, Neil.
It was a great episode last week. Thank you so much.
Last week's guest, absolutely. So with that, thank you for joining us, and have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.